All right, Psalm 143, let's call this one in summary, the enemy, a phrase that is literally going to come out of verse 3 in this psalm that starts off once again with a great summary point, a familiar theme. David asking God to hear his prayer, understanding that throughout the Psalms, David's humility in understanding that even though he was an anointed man after God's own heart, it was possibly foolish to assume that God was simply going to hear his prayer just because he was David and he was somehow special. He understands that in verse 2, basically no one living stands righteous before God. Thus, we are probably doing a little too much when we assume he is just going to hear our prayers, another recurring theme. Like we've said that we've seen throughout the Psalms. We see again here in Psalm 143 as David is going to go on to, as we mentioned in verse 3, say, "For the enemy has pursued my soul," the distinction between the enemy and my enemy, possibly being this. One of the bases for David's prayer here is going to be the fact that it seems to be an enemy that he has picked up in service to God, that he is crying for refuge from, as he is going to go on to say that he remembers, verse 5, the days of old when he would meditate on all that God has done for him. And as we mentioned before, another recurring theme is the way in which difficult times can cloud out our vision to the fact that life was not always this bad. And more importantly, during the better times in life, the things that can help us get back to that point, as opposed to being consumed with the size of the problems in front of us. David is going to understand, having been through difficult times before, that there is still a way out, as he will go on to ask God to answer me in verse 7, not to hide his face from him in verse 8. Let me hear of your steadfast love, another recurring theme. Make me know the way that I should go. Once again, another recurring theme. There's a difference between the way I'd like things to be and the way that I should go. Sometimes the way that I should go is along a more dangerous path that actually leads me to where I need to be. Whereas safety will simply keep me complacent, never accomplishing the things that I actually need to get done. But going on, he will ask in verse 9, God to deliver him in verse 10, to teach him, and also to let your good spirit once again lead him on level ground. As in verse 11, he is going to seem to move toward the end, where he is going to confidently say that because of his history having gone on, my parallel, past difficult problems in the past, he is confident that God is going to once again get him out of whatever difficulty he is confronting. Once again, not basing that confidence on the fact that I'm David, you gotta love me, God, but rather on the fact that as he concludes at the end of chapter 143, "For I am your servant," reminding me again of the basis of his plea. First of all, asking God for mercy, understanding that he cannot approach God on the basis of his own holiness. He is going to, however, seem to possibly appeal to God's sense of justice, understanding that actually being a servant of God, he has picked up some enemies along the way that are attributed to his service to God, not his own wrongdoing. And based upon that combination of a plea for mercy, for the things that he has done wrong, and the fact that God, as your servant, these are actually your enemies who have now turned on me. And based upon that plea, as God's servant, David asks for God's deliverance, reminding me of the fact that we often ask God for many things, but to the degree that the things I am asking for from God involve me needing deliverance from problems and enemies. As I sometimes say, I am probably at my best when I'm praying to God for deliverance from the enemy, as opposed to someone who is simply my enemy. Once again, the distinction being the enemy being an enemy I might have picked up in genuine service to God, as opposed to my enemy that I quite possibly might have picked up by doing me things my way.